Welcome, gentlemen, the top three finishers in the inaugural Malaysian Grand Prix: Eddie Irvine, Michael Schumacher and Mika Hakkinen. Eddie Irvine, you've been saying for a couple of races that Ferrari need Michael back. Michael's back. You've got the perfect result. How do you feel?
It's fantastic. This guy's depressing. Not only is he the best number one, he's also the best number two. You know, I don't know what we got to do with him, but it's going to be more difficult next year when I've got to fight against him. No, I just had to make sure I didn't make any mistakes and run a pace that I could run at. My car was very sharp on the turn-in, and I just was very, very worried I was going to spin, especially to his fast section. So I just had to be very careful and make sure I didn't make any mistakes, and Michael basically did the hard work for me.
Now, when you came out after your second stop and you were a few seconds behind Mika and slowly losing pace, did you know Mika was going to stop again, or do you think it was all over?
Well, we thought we knew he was going to stop. If he hadn't have done, we would have been very surprised. But that's, you know, he went so long, but we knew that's probably the strategy he was going to have to do. He probably thought he was quicker than us, but he was going to have to stay out longer. So we pretty much assumed that, and we read it correctly.
Thanks, Eddie. Michael, a unique strategy, a one stop on the softer tyres. Was that decided from the start or changed as you went along?
We had the option, to be honest, and we took the option of the one stop. Even so, I actually thought we would go for a two stop, but afterwards I'd say it worked out just perfectly to do the one stop.
Now, you played the perfect number two, but about a few laps in you let Eddie through, and then David got past as well. Was that an accident or part of the plan?
No, it wasn't part of the plan, because I knew I had to go for a very long first stint, and somehow I wanted to protect my tyres, and I didn't want to wheel spin them too much, so I went fairly slow out of the first corner, not expecting David to dive down to the inside, but he did, and we touched each other, which had some consequence for me later on. I had a bit of a damaged car, but after he stopped, obviously, the situation was a lot more easy.
Now, when you came in at the end of your first stop, your tyres seemed completely destroyed. How did you manage to control the pace so well?
Good question. I mean, first of all, I'd say the team has done a great job. I mean, everybody criticised the team of not developing the car, but at Nürburgring things could have been proven. This time we were able to prove how good our car is, and therefore it's thanks to the team. I mean, we won to a finish. I don't know how different were our lap times, but I guess they were pretty much together. And it's simply the car is doing well.
Thank you, Michael. Mika, on the podium, you looked absolutely exhausted. Are you feeling okay?
Yeah, I feel now okay. I didn't feel a couple of minutes ago. You know, it was so, you can imagine, it was the hardest race what I've ever done in my life, and it was the race where you have to just go flat out, you know, and those guys obviously they did brilliant tactics. You know, I cannot blame them. And they did a good job, and they won the race, and Michael was second. So obviously for me it was just pushing fast as I could and try to overtake Michael was always risky, because it was very slow actually in high-speed corners, and then when we went to a straight line, it was quite easy to accelerate in the exit of the corner, so it was impossible to overtake.
Now, we saw you on the inboard camera gesticulating a couple of times behind Michael. How frustrating was it to be stuck behind him for lap after lap after lap?
It's just a hard job, you know. You can imagine, you know, your car is sliding all the time, and I experienced that Michael was not consistent all the time in a different corners, so it was always you have to be careful what's going to happen. Is he going to break there or surprising places, and that's why obviously you have to put maximum concentration not to run back into him. And overtaking maneuvers, I suppose I did not have even a chance to try to overtake him.
Now, you scored a very important overtaking manoeuvre when you got past Johnny, because it means you're just 4 points behind Eddie going into the next race, the last race of Suzuka, for the championship. Do you still feel confident you can win?
Yeah, why not? I mean, I suppose it would be crazy not to think about that way. I'm confident in Suzuka and went well last year over there. So I'm not feeling at all we lost the championship. There is still one race to go.
Mika, thanks. Eddie, looking forward to Suzuka, it's well known it's your favourite track. I mean, how many times have you won there before in previous Formulae?
It was never actually a great circuit for me when I was in Japan. I think I only won there once. Bridgestone were always the big strong tyre at Suzuka, and I was always on Yokohamas or Dunlops, so it was always a really tough circuit for us to win on, and I remember we won once, and it was it was a bonanza, to be honest, to win there, because normally we won at the really slippery circuits like Mine and places in Sugo and places like that.
Now looking for both championships now, you're 4 points ahead, Ferrari are 4 points ahead, you've got Michael back, you must think you're going to win them both.
We have the potential to, you know, as Michael says, the car has improved big time. With Michael back, it's a big bonus. You know, we have all the places, you know, we have all the right pieces, we just got to put them in the right place. You know, it's up to us now. We made the start today, that's what we needed to do, and then we controlled the race. If we can do the same in Suzuka, it'll be a great day for the Tifosi, that's for sure.
Eddie, thanks. And now from Michael and Mika, a word in your own languages, please.
Britain's Eddie Irvine has won in Malaysia, followed by Michael Schumacher, Tony Jardine. It was the way that Schumacher protected Irvine that was the key to this race.
The Americans would call it a shutout, a total tactical shutout. And this was 2 times during this race. Michael Schumacher ahead, he lets Eddie Irvine through. This is as early as lap 4. There he goes, perfectly allowable within the team sport. You cannot, however, fix the race, okay? Tactically, that you don't want to bring the sport into disrepute.
And this is how it looks, of course, going into the last race. Eddie Irvine, odds on, I would think now 4 points clear of Mika Hakkinen, and looking great for Ferrari in the constructors as well. Okay, another chance. There's the constructors. Ferrari 4 points clear there. Right, competition time now. Another chance for you to enter our competition. We've teamed up with the Scottish Motor Show, due to be held in Glasgow next month, to give you prizes money just can't buy. It's the first Grand Prix of the 21st century. It's a great place for the race, and you could be there in the Melbourne sunshine. Our fantastic first prize, a VIP trip for you and a friend to next year's Australian Grand Prix, and some great hospitality from the new Jaguar team. We've also got VIP packages for 5 pairs of runners-up trips to the races at Barcelona, Manicourt, Silverstone, Hockenheim and Monza. And there are also 5 widescreen TVs and 5 games consoles to give away. All you've got to do is answer 2 simple questions with a distinctly Scottish theme. Which city is hosting the '99 Scottish Motor Show? Is it A, Edinburgh, B, Glasgow or C, Aberdeen? A, Edinburgh, B, Glasgow or C, Aberdeen? Question 2, how many Formula 1 championships has Jackie Stewart won? Is it A1, B3 or C5? A1, B3 or C5? The number to dial, 0900 122 9966, 0900 122 9966, and the best of luck to you all. Okay, final word on the Malaysian Grand Prix, Tony.
We haven't dared to say it before, but Eddie Irvine is now the favourite. When we look at it, tactical blunders from McLaren, that one-to-one man marking of covering Irvine's every move by Hakkinen, that's cost them dear. 20% failures this year, so Ferrari are now the favourites. McLaren really down in the dumps. And Hakkinen bent over double on the podium, that says it all. He likes it in a sauna, but the temperature was too high for the Finn.
Anything going to come from that protest, do you think?
Well, that's the last thing to see. He could claim that perhaps they're bringing the sport into disrepute by too much of the tactics in there and fixing the race. He could look at the tyres, how much tread is left. It's like your tyres in your road car.
My tyres are okay, by the way, my road car. Thank you very much. Right then, reminder, you can see a rerun of the Malaysia. Then, quite inspirational, Eddie Irvine goes to Suzuka, poised to deliver Ferrari the ultimate leaving present. Bye-bye.
Hearing first to Kuala Lumpur, where Eddie Irvine and Ferrari have both been dramatically disqualified from this morning's Malaysian Grand Prix. Irvine won the race with teammate Michael Schumacher finishing second, but the bodywork on both cars was later found to break FIA regulations, and both have been thrown out of the race. Much more than that, of course, the decision now provisionally hands Mika Hakkinen the World Championship title. The Finn finished third behind the 2 Ferraris, but has now been given the victory, which means he's 12 points clear in the championship with just the Japanese Grand Prix to come. Now, Ferrari have appealed against the ruling, standing by their belief that the race was won fair and square.
During the race at least, this could not have been more straightforward for the Ferrari team. A superlative start by both drivers, their only difficulty, David Coulthard, who managed to squeeze past Schumacher early on. But by lap 16, the Scottish threat was over when Coulthard's McLaren gave up the ghost. So for much of the race, the championship leader was confined to a cat and mouse chase with Schumacher's Ferrari. Eddie Irvine's second stop dropped him back into third, but the pit team made sure he had enough fuel to get him to the end. Hakkinen hadn't done the same. He was forced in for a second time, but lost a place to Johnny Herbert's Stuart Ford, another car he would have to pass before getting back the lead. But he never caught the Ferraris. They were in the clear. Irvine handed the lead by a selfish Schumacher and the race as well. But in the Parc Fermé afterwards, stewards found parts of the Ferrari bodywork that contravened the regulations. Parts of the car facing the ground did not conform. So unless the Italians' case is good, the Ferrari champagne has gone flat, and Hakkinen is world champion again. John Desborough, Sky News.
They could certainly have this race reinstated on appeal if the grounds of their appeal are successful. But there have been very few successful appeals in recent years, and the odds do seem to be stacked against them. Most people would not care to take a bet on Ferrari surviving this time round.
So pretty sensational stuff, much more to follow in the days ahead, I'm sure. Hakkinen, though, declared the champion for 1999 provisionally, depending on what Ferrari can come up with in their appeal. The same, of course, will apply to the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari were leading this morning, but have now lost the 16 points for a 1-2 and have been overtaken by McLaren. Much more on that for you later on. Now, the golf...
Great day for Ferrari and a brilliant result for your championship hopes as well.
Yeah, fantastic, you know. We basically did everything we needed to do. We qualified in the front row, we made the start, Michael let me through. No mistakes. A bit worried when DC got past Michael. I thought he was going to really give me a hard time, but he couldn't really get close enough, you know, and I felt quite confident I could keep him behind. But I today just had to get round and round, go round and round, not make any mistakes, because it's a hot day, it's a tough circuit, and offline was very slippy, so I just needed to be a little bit air on the side of caution just to get to the finish, you know, and I was changing gear early, you know, you're just paranoid. When you're going for the championship, you're just paranoid.
It's simply a perfect day, and now we can go forward to Suzuka and hopefully finish 2 or at least 1 of these championships in the good position and have the first pits for next year.
Michael makes one hell of a wingman.
Doesn't have. That's what I was driving around thinking, you know, this is quite handy having Michael as number 2. I was actually going to speak to Jaguar and see how much he'll cost to be my number 2.
So what do you reckon? Can you do it now? Can you get the title?
We can and we mightn't, you know, it's that simple. It can go either way.
Life isn't fair sometimes. They won and they were second. They got 10 points. They got second place. Life is not fair sometimes.
So Ferrari elated. Then, nearly 2 hours later, their mood would change, and so would the result of the Malaysian Grand Prix. We'll be back with the full story. You're back with us as we tidy up the aftermath of the Malaysian Grand Prix. We've seen a Ferrari 1-2, Eddie Irvine and Michael Schumacher, then the U-turn. Ferrari's Jean Todt at the centre of a media scrum. It emerged both Ferraris had been disqualified on a technicality. James Allen at Sepang watched the story unfold.
Well, an unbelievable development here in the paddock after what has been an absolutely sensational race, but sadly, the 2 Ferraris have been excluded. The technical delegate, Joe Bauer of the FIA, measured the bodywork of the cars and found that it was illegal. It's the barge boards just behind the front wheels that's the issue. He measured them, said they were illegal, showed it to the stewards of the meeting who make the decisions, and they agree with him. They issued this statement. They've obviously listened to Ross Brawn of Ferrari, what he had to say. He's accepted the bodywork did not conform. It's possible that Ferrari could argue in an appeal, if they choose to put one, that the barge boards didn't give them any kind of performance advantage, in which case I suppose it is possible that the drivers could keep their points and the team would lose theirs. But anything could happen between now and Suzuka. It's likely the appeal will be heard before Suzuka, but obviously if this is carried through, then Mika Häkkinen is automatically the 1999 Formula One world champion.
Now then, Tony, tell us about the exact procedure for examining cars at a Grand Prix.
Before any cars go out on the track, they all have to be inspected in their garages so that they comply. And it's the competitor's responsibility to make sure they comply. During practice, qualifying, there can be spot checks, whatever. But immediately after the race, all the cars have to go into the scrutineering bay again. They're measured, they're checked for every little thing. Now, Joe Bauer, who James was talking about, the technical delegate, he finds something out of order. He can then send a request upstairs to the 3 referees or stewards, and they, in this case, have said, right, the Ferraris are out.
Nice and simply, what do these barge boards do?
The barge boards are these big air deflectors which are just behind the front wheels, you can see there. They are quite crucial aerodynamic devices, and what they do is they help actually get the air to rush quicker underneath the car, improve the downforce, improve the traction of the car themselves. That's why it's key areas where Ferrari and McLaren have been working very hard of late in detail.
Are we talking sharp practice from Ferrari here?
No, I don't think we're talking sharp practice at all. I think we're talking a couple of millimetres. I think we're talking about a mistake. It wouldn't make that much of a difference. I can't see it myself.
OK, well, as James has said, Ferrari have given their side of the story at a press conference. Let's hear from Ross Brawn.
This is the turning vane on the side of the car. Now, the regulations state that this has to be the lower surface when you're looking from underneath the car. And as you can see, we're perfectly okay here. Unfortunately, when we get to here, there's a piece missing which goes between here and here, which makes... So this is the underside. So for reasons we've still got to establish, there's a piece missing just here.
Can you show it this way?
It's legal here. It's legal here. And there's a piece missing.
Can you say how much that is, Ross? Is it centimetres, 2 centimetres?
It's about, well, you can see it's about 10 millimetres, 1 centimetre. So there's a small area of the piece which is missing. We haven't established the reason how that's occurred. This piece is obviously checked. Certainly when the prototype was produced, everything is checked for legality. And we have to verify, establish what has gone wrong. I would just emphasise that there is no performance gain from such a piece, and obviously we wouldn't have produced a piece which we knew to be illegal, because the pieces are obviously checked by the FIA. So there's been a mistake which has left a small piece of material absent from this area.
No performance gain, but there's been a mistake. Will Ferrari now look for a scapegoat?
Well, if they do, it'll be Ross Brawn, because he's the technical director. By having that conference, he's holding his hand up and saying, look, I'm to blame, just as he did when the 4th wheel was missing at the last pit stop at the Nürburgring. But he'll have to explain that maybe to Agnelli himself, the big boss of Fiat.
And where does all this leave Eddie Irvine?
Well, absolutely gutted, of course, but, you know, it's 35 years since the last British driver won a world championship for Ferrari, and that was John Surtees. And that will really, if the appeal is unsuccessful, that will haunt Eddie Irvine for the rest of his days, missing the world championship.
Not a great day for the sport.
No, it's not. It's devaluing the sport. It's not a good advertisement at all, I'm afraid.
Good, Tony. Thank you very much indeed. We will be back with more from Sepang. Oh, yeah. We've got our competition as well. See you shortly. So then, as it stands this Sunday afternoon, Ferrari have admitted their mistake, but they're still going to appeal. But take away the 10 points for Eddie Irvine, and this is what you get. Mika Häkkinen, 72 points, 12 points clear of Irvine, a maximum 10 points for a win, of course. Then Frentzen, Coulthard and the Schumachers, both non-scorers in Malaysia. And McLaren win the Constructors' Championship as well, because they go 18 points clear, maximum 16 points for a 1-2. But really, what a way to decide a World Championship. More reaction from Sepang now. First of all, from Dave Ryan. He's the McLaren team manager.
Well, they had an hour after the results were official to appeal against the steward's decision. They've done that. effectively that buys them a bit of time to think about it, decide what their next course of action is, and as I say, we'll just have to wait and see how it proceeds from here.
You have to wait 48 hours before you can crack into a smile.
Yeah.
You used to run Eddie Irvine, so from a personal point of view, it must be sad to see it end for him this way. It was looking so promising earlier today.
Well, I think everybody deep down somewhere is a little bit of a Ferrari fan, and I think after so many years, everybody would have loved Ferrari to win it, and obviously we do have some personal attachment with Eddie as being an ex-Jordan driver, so yes, it would have been a nice little celebration, and I think it would have been good for Formula One to win, for Ferrari to win the World Championship, but unfortunately, as it looks at the moment, it's not likely to be.
Very sad day. Thanks a lot, Trevor.
Okay, thanks.
Trevor Foster there, Jordan confirmed as third in the Constructors' Championship. Well, Murray Walker has been there and seen it all over the last 50 years. He's saddened by today's experience.
5 years ago, I stood in a darkened paddock in Spa in Belgium to announce to a startled world that race winner Michael Schumacher had been excluded from the results. Today, sadly, I'm doing exactly the same thing in Malaysia about the same man and his teammate Eddie Irvine. We came here and we've had a wonderful weekend. Malaysia has done us proud. Wonderful hospitality at a superb circuit and a magnificent race, as a result of which we thought both World Championships were going down to the wire in Japan. But now they are both out, the Ferraris, on a technicality. What a sad situation. Of course it's right that rules are rules and they have to be implemented. But at the present moment, the sport is suffering greatly, in my opinion. I can only hope that the appeal in Paris will reinstate Ferrari and that everything will be all right for us to go to Japan to enjoy a wonderful climax to what has been a wonderful season. And as a final thought, Eddie Irvine is in his aeroplane with the phone turned off. I wonder how he's going to feel.
He won't want to get that phone call for sure. In the crazy world of Formula One, can you best guess what might happen at that appeal, Tony?
No, it's very difficult. Traditionally, appeals have failed. So there has to be a good basis for the case. It may well be that Ferrari had all those parts on in the Nürburgring and they were passed then. It may well be there was no performance advantage. They must feel they have some sort of basis for a strong case, otherwise they wouldn't have gone to appeal.
Like Murray, you're a motor racing man through and through. Deep down, what are your emotions here this Sunday afternoon?
Well, it's a terrible empty feeling, really. Like lots of the fans out there, they will feel potentially robbed if it doesn't happen of that great championship crescendo. I mean, I was really excited. I've been excited all season. We've only had 3 dull races. And all the work and toil that's gone in by Ferrari, I don't think Mika Häkkinen would want to win it this way if he does finally win it this way, but at least his anguish is at an end and he doesn't have to go off and see the psychiatrist. But it is the world's most technologically advanced sport. You must have stringent regulations to police it.
It's the only sport that I know of where people go out of the stadium and then pick up a paper or listen to the radio or watch television and the result gets overturned.
Yeah, but unfortunately those are procedures of appeal and hours afterwards. It takes so long to check the cars. They have to be absolutely right.
Tony, thank you very much indeed. One thing's for sure, we won't forget the first Malaysian Grand Prix in a hurry, but now's your chance to see some of next year's action at first hand, because we have teamed up with the Scottish in Malaysia tonight, 11:45, the full F1 coverage, and we go to Japan in a couple of weeks. For the Rugby World Cup, no titles for Ferrari. Mika Häkkinen's world turned upside down. Good afternoon.
Well, the team has appealed, and today Formula One's governing body will make some kind of announcement. Part of the bodywork on the Ferrari cars was ruled illegal by just a fraction of an inch after they'd won the race. Here's Peter Staunton.
After the drama of the race, the Ferrari team celebrated a famous and comprehensive victory over their McLaren rivals. Now it was all down to the last race in Japan, with their man already in pole position to take the title. But as Eddie Irvine milked the applause, victory was about to be snatched from his grasp by race stewards wielding the Formula One rulebook. They measure each body part to the millimetre to make sure it conforms to complex regulations. What they found was a wind-deflecting panel which was simply 1 centimetre too small. Ferrari said it didn't affect the car's performance. Their appeal will be heard sometime this week, and they're desperately hoping the decision will be reversed.
I would just emphasise that there is no performance gain from such a piece.
But they admit the rules were broken. and many experts think the disqualification should stand.
I mean, the rules are the rules. Things have got to be a certain size, the car has got to be a certain width, minimum width, maximum width, length, etc. You know, if David Beckham struck a 40-yard shot and hit the underside of the crossbar, bounced on the line, blinking good effort. But, you know, if it's not in, it's not in. You're not going to give him a goal for it.
The conspiracy theorists will now be claiming that Bernie Ecclestone, who effectively runs the sport, will pressure the rule makers to let Ferrari off the hook. That, of course, would create the perfect climax to the season and compulsive television viewing around the world. And curiously, Mika Hakkinen, who won the title thanks to Ferrari's bungling, will be happy to accept that result. He admitted he wasn't comfortable being awarded his second championship in such circumstances. Peter Staunton, ITN Sport.
Qualification will be heard in Paris on Friday, although a decision isn't expected until Sunday.
24 hours after the Ferrari fiasco at the Malaysian Grand Prix, the team's manager Jean Todt faced the music and the press back in Italy.
I went to the president of Ferrari, and I told him that I was there at his discretion about what he wanted to do for the future of the team, and that's it.
There were plenty of long faces in the pit lane yesterday when Ferrari learned of the FIA's decision to disqualify both the Ferraris of Irvine and Schumacher, who finished first and second. That handed the race and seemingly a second driver's title to Mika Hakkinen. He says it's no way to win the championship, as Ferrari won in Kuala Lumpur fair and square. The row is over a side deflector panel that was found to violate regulations because it was 10 millimetres too short. Ferrari insists there was no performance advantage, but they'll have the chance to argue the case at an appeal hearing in Paris on Friday, with the result due at the weekend. By then, Ferrari and Irvine should know whether the championship is lost or whether it will come down to a duel with the McLaren for the title in Japan. Richard John
will decide on Friday if Ferrari's appeal against double disqualification in the Malaysian Grand Prix will be successful. Mika Hakkinen was declared world champion for a second successive year on Sunday when Eddie Irvine and his Ferrari teammate Michael Schumacher were both disqualified. The story made front-page news in Italy. Irvine and Schumacher's first and second placings in the race didn't count because of illegal deflector panels on their cars that may have given them a speed advantage. Ferrari's French general manager, Jean Todt, on Monday offered his resignation in the wake of the scandal.
I'm the responsible of what had happened, being the responsible of the team. And I said that this morning when I came, I went to the president of Ferrari, and I told him that I was there at his discretion about what he wanted to do for the future of the team.
His resignation wasn't accepted. Monsieur Todt admits Ferrari made a mistake by not properly checking the cars, but says the deflectors don't increase the potential or speed of the vehicles anyway. He adds that he trusts completely in the appeal process. But the last Ferrari driver to win a world championship is less than sympathetic. South African Jody Scheckter says the Italian team simply broke the rules.
They've got to make sure that their car is within the regulations. I know that Formula One, you are always trying to get your car as close to the edge of the regulations as possible, and that's accepted, and that's part of it, and that's what you have to do. But you can't go over the line, and if you go over the line, you're going to be penalised. They have to be penalised. If they get out of being penalised, I think it's, how do you deal with things in the future? They say it's only a centimetre, but a centimetre in different places of the car is a massive amount.
And this isn't the reaction you'd expect from a newly crowned world champion. Mika Hakkinen says it does not feel right. It is not the way to settle the championship. They won the race fair and square on the track.
of the event. Keep you right up to date here throughout the day tomorrow too. Now, Eddie Irvine's received the backing from the head of Formula One, Bernie Ecclestone, today. He's currently in Hong Kong. He was disqualified from Sunday's Malaysian Grand Prix, handing the world title to Mika Hakkinen. Ecclestone believes the sports regulations are too strict and says the championship shouldn't be decided by the way the Ferrari cars were set up.
Well, I think, you know, it's not a very sporting way to finish the championship, and even Mika Hakkinen has admitted that. You know, I don't think he wants to win the championship the way he's won it at the minute. The FIA, you know, you have to believe that they're going to do the right thing, but we have to wait until Friday to see.
Hampshire have
rigid if there is no competitive advantage to be gained?
Well, I suppose what the rule book cannot take in is whether there is a significant advantage to be gained. You just don't know. I mean, millimetres, just very small adjustments in these cars can make a difference. That's why a very strict and a very long rule book is drawn up. And if you go against those rules, you've broken them, and you have to pay the price for that. And that looks as though will happen to Ferrari. They paid the price with their disqualification. They're appealing against it, but it's very difficult to see how that decision could be reversed.
What's the general mood in Formula One circles at this point, Neil? I mean, is there a feeling that Ferrari have been cheated, or that Ferrari were cheating?
Nobody has come out and said that they think Ferrari were cheating. I think the general view in the sport is that it would be a very disappointing way to decide this year's championship. Both McLaren and Ferrari have admitted that. It's certainly not the way they would want the season to end. But McLaren point out that the rules do have to be strictly applied, particularly in such critical circumstances as these. McLaren are going to be represented here, as are the Stewart team, because if the decision stands, they will be promoted to stand a much better chance of finishing higher up the Constructors' Championship. So it's not just Ferrari's interests which are at stake here, it's other teams as well.
D-Day for Eddie Irvine, arriving for the appeal hearing that he hopes will keep him in this Formula One World Championship. Ferrari had said that he wouldn't be attending, but this should give him a personal chance to appeal for what he calls a fairer ruling, and for the 10 points to be given back to him that were taken from him on a technicality in Sepang. The issue here is simple. Did Ferrari reduce the width of the barge boards or reflectors on the sides of their cars in Malaysia to make their cars go faster? They claim that would have been foolhardy and they would have been caught immediately by the officials. But the court will hear their version of events today, and also evidence from members of other invited teams.
I think what's at stake here is that the regulations in the long term are properly adhered to, and that all the teams know what rules to build their cars to. That's important.
At stake here is not just Eddie Irvine's tilt at the driver's title this season, but also the rules themselves. Some say they should not be bent for Ferrari. John Desborough, Sky News in Paris.
Federation officials will announce Saturday morning whether Ferrari's victory in last week's Malaysian Formula One Grand Prix can stand. Lawyers for the Italian team appealed Friday against a disqualification because their cars did not strictly meet specifications. With just one race to go in the season, tomorrow's ruling could determine the 1999 championship. Well, joining me now for more is sports lawyer Andrew Moritz of In Touch Management. Andrew, what's at stake in the decision that we're expecting Saturday morning?
there's a great deal at stake, not just for Ferrari and McLaren, who are fighting it out for the championship, but for the sport at large. If the appeal's upheld, we'll know that the sport has integrity and that rules are rules and they're stuck by. But the commercial fallout will be massive because viewing will be down, sponsors will be unhappy, and all those involved will feel like it's been a bit of a damp squib.
So what could the motivation be behind not upholding this ruling? Could it be a business motivation rather than a sports motivation?
Well, I wouldn't want to cast aspersions over the decision makers, but it will, of course, be tempting to try and find a way to allow Eddie Irvine and Ferrari to still contest the championship because, you know, you can say, well, it's such a tiny little thing, you know, it's such an unfair consequence, but the fact is that's the rule. That's the consequence, disqualification. If it had happened to a smaller team or at a different stage in the season, it wouldn't have been such an issue.
Well, that is an issue. I mean, you think if the sport is the sport and we want the passion to go on in the Formula One, is a 1 centimeter, I believe it was 1 centimeter out of that was missing from a car, is it unfair to disqualify a team for such a tiny detail?
I don't think so. You know, it does seem crazy, but they know what the rules are. They spend £100 million a year on the technological superiority that they gain. They should be able to observe the rules that are in the rule book. It's not that difficult. And the fact is that, you know, all sorts of things go on. All the teams sail as close to the wind as they can. And when they overstep the mark, they've got to be shown that you can't mess around. They're not going to just bend it just to allow for an exciting end of the season. I think that would be wrong.
So briefly, what do you think the outcome will be Saturday morning?
I think they'll uphold the original decision, and I think it will be a shame, but there you go.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there then. Andrew Morris from In Touch Management, thank you very much.
Sports International Court of Appeal heard Ferrari's protest against the disqualification of its drivers last Sunday in Malaysia. A panel of 5 independent judges listened to more than 4 hours of testimony, then proceeded with their deliberations in private. Thus, motor racing fans will have to wait until Saturday to see if Ferrari's hopes of its first World Drivers' title in 20 years are still possible. Ferrari drivers Eddie Irvine and Michael Schumacher finished 1-2 in Kuala Lumpur, but those results were overturned after it was found that Ferrari cars didn't comply with FIA regulations. The decision gave McLaren's Mika Hakkinen enough points to retain his world title. Now, if Ferrari win their appeal, Irvine will take a 4-point lead over Hakkinen into the season finale in Japan.
This is an extremely serious review, you know, and it goes through all points, facts, law, etc. Each party makes its points. Everything's discussed in a very professional, serious manner, and this is what happened.
All the procedures seem to have been handled correctly. We've got 5 independent judges that are going to be looking at it, so I have every confidence in the FIA Court of Appeal in this instance that it will be done correctly. What's at stake here is that the regulations in the long term are properly adhered to, and that all the teams know what rules to build their cars to. That's important.
We don't want to express any opinion, give an explanation in that respect. You'll see that in the decision tomorrow.
Stewart representatives were present at the hearing because they want to keep their 2nd and 3rd places they inherited after the Ferrari disqualification. Now, Ferrari driver Irvine was also in attendance, urging the judges to reinstate his win and preserve his world title aspirations.
Sky News on the Hour with Alan King.
Good morning. Eddie Irvine and Ferrari will find out in the next few minutes if they're still in the race for the Formula One title. The FIA appeal hearing will deliver its verdict on the team's disqualification from the Malaysian Grand Prix. This is what it is all about. Irvine and Michael Schumacher were thrown out of the race after checks on their cars revealed they had infringed technical regulations. As you see there, the barge board 10 millimeters too short. And we'll have a look at all the background to that. Here's the latest from John Desborough.
You'll have to wait and see, Eddie Irvine said yesterday. Well, today, the waiting stops. Lawyers representing Ferrari emphasised their respect for the Court of Appeal and the decision of the FIA. but they said they weren't optimistic. The team even appeared to bring along barge boards as well, perhaps in an attempt to sway the decision their way, by showing that the conforming deflector was exactly the same as one that didn't conform to the regulations. But from the look on Irvine's face and the expression of the team's officials, today's decision is very difficult to guess. And the governing body as well has a point to prove. No team or driver is bigger than the sport itself. John Desborough, Sky News, Paris.
Well, the latest we are hearing, literally in the last few moments, is that Ferrari did win that race. That's the latest we have now. Obviously, we'll be crossing live to Paris as soon as we possibly can. The FIA is about to make its announcement, and we will have that for you. But we gather that Ferrari did win the race. That's the latest we have on that at the moment. Back to that Ferrari appeal. The latest we have, Ferrari have won their appeal against disqualification. We'll hear what Max Mosley had to say announcing that verdict for the FIA.
But having regard to the fact that the dimensions in no part of the turning vane exceeded the tolerance allowed by the regulations, and having regard to the uncertainty introduced by the methods of measurement and the wording of the regulation itself, the Court of Appeal decided to overturn the decision of the stewards, and therefore the original result of the race stands in its entirety. That is to say, the drivers have the points that they earned in the race, and so does the constructor, Ferrari. That was the decision of the Court of Appeal.
That's Max Mosley, the FIA president, saying that the Ferrari appeal has been won, has been upheld. Jackie Levy is with me to talk in more detail about this. Jackie, it seems at first glance a bit of a shambles, frankly. First Ferrari win, then the stewards say no, it's illegal. This gentleman says that the tolerance was not exceeded. What on earth is going on?
Well, basically there was a very tiny piece on the Ferrari car which was in no way helped them to win this race, which was 10 millimetres too short. They've obviously got regulations, they have to be this long, and the barge board on this particular car was 10 millimetres too short, and there was a complaint afterwards. The stewards decided to disqualify the two drivers who had won, both Ferrari drivers. Eddie Irvine came first, Michael Schumacher came second. They were disqualified from the race, and the driver who came third, Mika Häkkinen, was promoted so that he won the race. That meant that Mika Häkkinen then gathered enough points to win the whole championship, which would have been terrible. With one race to go, you would have had one driver sitting there who'd been handed the championship literally on a plate over a technicality. So what they have decided to do is to reinstate those two results from the Kuala Lumpur Grand Prix, which means that Ferrari came first and second. Those results now stay, which means that Eddie Irvine now leads the championship going into one race left. It's all very exciting. He leads by 4 points ahead of Mika Häkkinen. So it's all wide open now going into the last race in Japan. So I think this is possibly the right decision. It would be a great shame for the sport if they'd decided all on a technicality and it would have been cut and dried before the last race of the season, simply because Ferrari had this oversight on their car, which the appeal panel have now decided did not make any difference to that race.
OK, well, Jackie, stay with us because we'll have another chat about what this exactly means. John Desborough has been actually watching the press conference there. John, what can you tell us other than the fact that Ferrari now appear to have won?
Well, it's good news for Eddie Irvine, and no doubt being a bit of a Sky News viewer, if he's still in Europe or indeed in the Far East, he will be watching this and be quite happy. I'm going to try and show you precisely where on this Formula One car Ferrari proved that their barge board wasn't 10 millimetres but 5 millimetres, and where they managed to claim that the measurements that the FIA made, or rather that the stewards made, weren't quite correct, and that the ruling on this wasn't quite legally tight enough in order for that revised rule to stand. But let's try and show you this. If you can pick up here on this diagram, which one of the sports magazines produced this week, and if you can picture a Ferrari here, that's the front, that's the back. This is the thing that we've been calling a barge board or a turning vane, I think it was described as by Max Mosley, the FIA president, in that press conference. It's also known as a deflector. and it was this little piece of metal down here which the stewards in Malaysia said was too small and possibly gave Ferrari this performance advantage. And Ferrari have yesterday very successfully shown that on their jig, when they measured it, it wasn't 10 millimeters too small. The tolerance was 5 millimeters, and anyway that the ruling wasn't correctly worded in the governing body's rules, and that the tolerance was better than they thought, and it's that gets Ferrari back in. The obvious reaction is anything to get Ferrari back into the championship, and anything to take the championship down to the final race, because we want to have the conclusion to the championship that everybody wants to have, and that's what the cynics are saying by way of a reaction to this announcement.
Well, John, you've been following this, and we were talking before the appeal took place that it's quite unusual for an appeal under these conditions to be successful. I mean, what is your reaction? Are you surprised?
I am, but hearing that the evidence was good and that Ferrari put forward a good case, then we shouldn't be surprised. If the evidence and the defence was good yesterday, then there's really no surprise to this. The Formula One governing body was left pretty much only with that option. That the way that things had been measured and the decision that was made in Malaysia wasn't correct, and the appeal stands, and therefore Eddie Irvine and Ferrari are back into the championship. There is a lot of politics, there is a lot of Machiavellian politics that goes on in Formula One, or so people would have us believe, and they would also have us believe that perhaps pressure would have been put on the Formula One governing body. But Max Mosley, the president, pointed out right at the beginning of the press conference that the people that look after the commercial aspects of the sport, that's to say that turn it into the television spectacle that it is around the world, had nothing to do with this, and that Mr. Bernie Ecclestone, who looks after the commercial aspects of Formula One, is only one vote on the council of 24 that actually run the sport. So the commercial aspects and the legal aspects and aspects of principle in the sport have been kept entirely separate, but they were very careful to emphasise that at the beginning of the press conference.
Well, John, one question one has to ask briefly is that if the stewards have made a decision which has now apparently been proved to be flawed, how can that happen, and will there be any changes to avoid a fiasco like this in future?
Well, immediately you'd suggest that the rules will be tightened up and the wording of rules on things like this, but Patrick Head, who is the technical director of the Williams Formula One team, made the comment, without wanting to support either side of the case, that if you took some metres down many of the cars in the Formula One paddock, you'd probably find that some of the tolerances in some of the other areas of the cars are probably out as well. But it's a sport of aerodynamics, and somehow they try, in the wording of the rules, to be very precise about what you can, what you cannot do on the car, what size certain aspects of the car have to be. It is all very complicated. Perhaps back to the rule book for Formula One's governing body.
John, thank you very much indeed for that. John Desborough there. Aaron's reaction to the FIA decision very shortly here on Sky News. Jackie Levy is with me. Jackie, it's going to be a bit difficult to pre-guess this, but McLaren will obviously be disappointed, but in a way they were only winning by default, weren't they?
That's right. I mean, they're the team that stood most to lose by the appeal being overturned, because of course if the appeal hadn't been overturned, then Mika Hakkinen would have been world champion. They would have won the Constructors' Championship, which is of course what it's all about.
Well, I think we can actually cross now live to McLaren headquarters in Woking.
First thing I should say off the record is that don't think we're surprised, because we're not. Please respect the fact that is off the record, and we didn't anticipate any different outcome. And what we are surprised is how they actually managed to achieve it. Right, the actual mechanism. Who needs something live? You know, let me do what you want me to do first.
Yeah, if you could just read us a statement, perhaps, or well, I have give us your reaction.
Okay, fine. And is this live? When are we going to go live?
I think we're probably live now.
We are? Oh, okay, fine. Well, the first thing is that it's really, more than anything else, a bad day for the sport. What has actually occurred is through a very heavy scrutiny of our rules, which are extensive, very detailed, a way has been found, and if we were in the same situation, we'd be looking for similar ways to provide a reason for the appeal to be upheld. Now the subject is complex, and there's various clauses that you have to cross-reference within the rule. It is our firm belief, and I think it's a belief that's held by probably every technical director, bar one, in Grand Prix racing, that the 5mm tolerance that has been used to explain this error on the Ferrari car is in fact a tolerance that is applicable to apply to that part of the car. Now, unless you get into the history of the rule and go back to when the rule was first made in the early 80s, you aren't able to grasp the fact fully that this rule was specifically designed to accommodate manufacturing problems with the flat bottom of the car, and didn't have any relevance to the vertical plane. But on top of that, obviously there's been a reassessment of the measurement process, a piece of equipment that's cost many millions of dollars, not only to have made, but also move around the world, which has been used in the past and probably in the future to verify the legality of a car, has suddenly been brought into question, as has the competence of the FIA's own people. Therefore, you have a twofold sort of mental approach. The first is you have to accept that the FIA individuals who were part of this process have not demonstrated competence, that the equipment that they have used for several years and was updated 2 years ago is suddenly brought into question on accuracy. It may interest some people to know that this piece of equipment is actually set up using lasers. So I think even the most untechnical person can appreciate that if you're using lasers to establish the accuracy of a piece of equipment, then it falls well within the capability of that equipment to measure within a millimetre. And then, of course, you have to bring into play the second part of the process, which is this interpretation of a regulation. Are we disappointed? No. Are we surprised? Not really. We think the push now for our sport has inevitably become quite commercial. Everybody wants to have an exciting race in Japan, but I think that the price we've paid for that one race is too great.
Ferrari say that this was an innocent mistake which anyway didn't give them any advantage, it didn't enhance performance. Do you have any sympathy at all with that point of view?
Oh, absolutely. I am convinced that it was a mistake. I think that it's slightly hypocritical to say that there's no performance influence, because effectively that is a very aerodynamically critical area on the car, hence the reason why these particular components, the turning vanes, were covered up every time the car stopped. But even if this oversight, this mistake, had had a negative influence on the performance of the car, that was immaterial, because the regulations state, irrespective of whether that particular component or any component on the car does or does not contribute positively or negatively to the performance of the car, the regulation states that if it doesn't comply, then the car is deemed to be not in compliance, and that is a rule which has been rigorously enforced over many years of Grand Prix racing.
Ron Dennis, the McLaren team manager there. Jackie is with me. Now, Jackie, after that, I'm almost as confused as Mr. Dennis seemed to be at the beginning of the press conference. I was a little bit baffled beforehand. Now I'm completely befuddled.
Well, he was talking a lot of technicalities there, and of course I think you have to be really, really, really involved in the sport at a very sort of highly technical level to understand what he was talking about. But you could sort of sense, reading between the lines, a certain amount of scepticism for this decision. He's saying rules are rules. Ferrari have broken them, and therefore, you know, the appeal should not have been upheld, and that the original decision to disqualify the drivers really should have stood because they've broken the rules, they've contravened the rules.
But have they, in fact? Because the FIA seem to be saying, well, they were within the tolerance, so have they or haven't they?
Well, that was the argument that, of course, Ferrari put forward, and obviously put forward very well, which is why the appeal has been upheld. And you could sort of sense the note of scepticism in his voice about how on earth they've managed to succeed in this appeal. He's also saying that the piece of equipment they actually used to measure these barge boards, and in fact measure all the different sort of dynamics of the car, involved using lasers, and it's a very, very, very high-tech piece of equipment. So you can kind of get the impression from him there that he's saying that there's in no way this equipment could be faulty or could have made the wrong measurement. So he's obviously very disappointed. He says they're not disappointed, but he is, because McLaren would have won the Constructors' Championship and Mika Hakkinen would have won the Drivers' Championship. And now we have to go to the last race of the season in Japan, and of course it's all up in the air, but I mean, as it should be, an exciting end to the season.
Just very, very briefly indeed, Jackie, is this the end of the matter, or is there any other, I mean, could McLaren appeal against this decision? Is there a higher court, if you like?
No, I doubt
So
it.
that's it.
They'll go to Japan and they'll fight it out on the track.
Jackie, thank you very much indeed.
Real team, and that's what we are. You share the failures and you share the successes, and this is just another race that is contributing its 16th contribution to the World Championship. I'm not going to get paranoid about the situation. I'm really going to just get focused on the balance of the season, which in this instance is one Grand Prix.
Ron Dennis on Ferrari's good fortune. What's a few millimetres between friends? It does give the Formula One season the final round climax that most people have been hoping for. Eddie Irvine now back leading the championship by those 4 points from Mika Hakkinen. And that final race of the season is the Japanese Grand Prix in Suzuka next Sunday.
Decision from the FIA that could totally change the outcome of the championship. The sports ruling body having reversed its decision to disqualify Ferrari from last week's Malaysian Grand Prix on a technicality, so reopening the championship race, which McLaren thought it had already won.
Having regard to the fact that the dimensions in no part of the turning vane exceeded the tolerance allowed by the regulations, and having regard to the uncertainty introduced by the methods of measurement and the wording of the regulation itself, the Court of Appeal decided to overturn the decision of the stewards, and therefore the original result of the race stands in its entirety.
Rarely in the history of motor racing can so much have hinged on so little. The contentious measurement on the aerodynamic deflectors of the two Ferraris that finished 1 and 2 in last week's Malaysian Grand Prix was a matter of millimetres. The FIA's ruling, which reinstated Eddie Irvine and Michael Schumacher, bringing cries of foul from McLaren and joy from the Italians.
What I wanted was the team to be exonerated because, you know, if I didn't want people to think it was politics, it was business or any of that sort of carry-on that got us reinstated. It was pure technical matter that the car was legal all along, which is fantastic. So everyone's totally exonerated.
The decision coming out of the Court of Appeal today in Paris is at best disappointing, but far more importantly, it's a sad day for our sport. The rules that have been interpreted in respect of manufacturing tolerances were never meant to be applied to anything other than the flat bottom of the car.
Careful examination of the rules and the facts has shown that the relevant part conforms with the rules. Now, it may not suit some of the other teams, but that is what's happened. It was demonstrated in front of them. The measurements were taken in front of them by our technical delegate, and it is indisputable that the turning vane is within the tolerance foreseen by the regulations. Therefore, to reach any other conclusion would have been completely unjust to Ferrari.
To the neutrals, the FIA's ruling is a decision that saved the season, setting up a thriller for the final Grand Prix in Japan. With Eddie Irvine entering the race, leading Häkkinen in the drivers' standings by 4 points, a win for the Ferrari man in Suzuka would give his team its first F1 championship in 20 years, as well as earning the constructors' title. If Häkkinen places first, he'll retain the Formula One crown for McLaren. All of which makes a tidier end to the season than the previous scenario, the one fact on which both teams have agreed. Incidentally, Max Mosley went on to say that controversies like this one could easily arise again, the F1 Supremo suggesting that pushing the boundaries to the limit is what the sport's cutting-edge technology is all about.
It was all about...
Enjoy the money now. Formula One boss Bernie Ecclestone is selling up to half of his stake in Formula One administration, the company that oversees the sport, to a unit of Germany's Deutsche Bank. The 67-year-old Ecclestone, who's considered to be the most powerful man in European auto racing, has long indicated his desire to sell his shares of Formula One to the public. The deal announced Tuesday with the German bank is said to be worth $1.3 billion. Meantime, the anticipation is building ahead of Sunday's season ending and championship deciding Japanese Grand Prix in Suzuka. On Tuesday, a star-studded promotional event was held in Tokyo, but one driver not on hand was world champion Mika Häkkinen, who is focusing squarely on race preparations. Eddie Irvine was on hand and with a chance to win the title after Ferrari's successful appeal against a disqualification in Malaysia. He's feeling positive thoughts all around.
Suzuka has always been a good circuit for me because basically I raced here for 3 years in Japanese Formula Sanzen. We did so many laps around there, I could drive around it probably with my eyes closed. And I genuinely think I probably could drive it around it with my eyes closed. Not very fast, but I think I could do the lap. But I think that's a big part of it. I think last year Ferrari always worked very hard right to the very end of the season, and we were always improving the car. And it's again same this year. We've got the best car we've had this year coming into this race with the best engines.
Irvine has a chance of ending Ferrari's 2-decade-long title drought if he finishes ahead of Hakkinen or even closely behind. Should the Finn win the race, he'll repeat as champion for the McLaren team. And
race of the 1999 Formula One Grand Prix season. The title will be decided this weekend here in Suzuka, with Ferrari in a position to take the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship away from McLaren. Eddie Irvine leads Mika Hakkinen by 4 points and has put the controversy about the Malaysian Grand Prix out of his mind.
It's not just that, it's the whole of Italy. It's, you know, the Ferrari fans all around the world, the mechanics. Jean here will probably be more nervous than anyone else. You know, Malaysia, I have to say, I wasn't nervous at all. I was, you know, we'll see about here, so far so good.
We know exactly what we have to try to achieve with Eddie, with Michael, with the team. We just have to, to concentrate as much as we can. For the third year in a row, we are playing the championship in the last race. 97-98 did not work. We hope it will work in 99.
Baseball.